Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever this finds you. Welcome to the 94th Emerging Growth Conference and day one of our two-day virtual investor conference. I'm Anna Berry. Just a few notes. Today we're running until 5 Eastern. And when we switch over to the next company, you might see a black screen for a moment. Don't go anywhere. That's just us moving over to the next presenter. But if you do experience downtime for more than a minute or two, refresh your browser. And our platform does work best on Google Chrome. So if you're watching from an Apple device, you have to hit the play button to start the session. Now, during each company's presentation today, you can submit questions through our webcast module, and we will attempt to address as many of these at the end of the presentation. Now, remember, all of our conferences, they're uploaded to the Emerging Growth Conference YouTube, so please subscribe. That's youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. Now, let's begin with African Bitcoin, but first, we're going to start with a video.
Africa Bitcoin Corporation was built to close the capital gap holding back Africa's small and medium enterprises, the engine of employment across Africa.
Africa Bitcoin Corporation is a private credit fund, growth capital, and financial services group serving African SMEs, supporting businesses, unlocking opportunity, and helping create what the company calls human yield, real jobs, real businesses, and real impact. As at May 2026, ABC's loan book had funded 45 SMEs across 23 industries, supporting and creating over 2,400 jobs. At the center of this model is Warren Wheatley, founder and CEO of Africa Bitcoin Corporation. Warren is a chartered accountant and investment veteran with deep experience across banking, wealth management, institutional investments, and capital markets. The group's CIO is Akshay Karan, a passionate chartered accountant whose background includes experience with exposure to private equity, sustainable finance, capital raising, and risk management. Alongside him is Stafford Masie, Director of Bitcoin Strategy, a pioneering South African technologist and entrepreneur. Together, they are building a listed African financial services platform designed for both institutional and retail investors.
ABC is an SME growth accelerator, leveraging its strategic Bitcoin reserve for access to lower cost capital. This capital is then deployed into the SME fund across African markets, creating a private credit flywheel powered by Bitcoin. ABC is listed on the JSE main board and A2X and is currently trading on the NSX, OTCQB, and Börse Frankfurt.
With future market access planned through Aquis in the UK, Africa Bitcoin Corporation, ABC is the solution the world is looking for.
CQB under the symbol AFBCF and on the JSE under the symbol BAC. It's a financial services group that provides private credit loans and other funding instruments to small and medium-sized enterprises across Africa and holds Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. Happy to welcome founder and CEO Warren Wheatley and Director of Bitcoin Strategy, Stafford Masie. Welcome, gentlemen. We're very happy to have you on our platform today.
Hi there. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to discussing. All right, so let's kick off. To all the investors, welcome. Thank you for your time this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you find yourself. I'm here to talk about ABC. We are the world's first Bitcoin-backed SME growth accelerator. As mentioned, we are trading and have traded on the JSE for the last 3 years. Who we are. We're actually a cash generative financial services group, and we use Bitcoin as a strategic treasury asset. So the company deals in private credit, growth capital to SMEs, and financial services across those SMEs. The model is quite simple. We originate and manage secured loans, providing growth capital to African SMEs. And from an African or South African perspective, we borrow the money we lend the money to the SMEs at around 18 to 22%. And that, while our international guests may think is harsh, is a terribly affordable rate in South Africa. We report in South African Rand, and we use global IFRS standards for our annual and integrated reports. We do use Bitcoin as capital or as pristine collateral, and we'll get into that a little bit later. The leadership team, you've met myself. I'm going to hand over to my business partner and director of Bitcoin strategy to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Stafford Masie. So as it says, I'm director of Bitcoin strategy, and I've had quite an evolution in the business. I originally joined as the chairman of the board. And as we evolved into our Bitcoin strategy, I stepped down in my chairman role and assumed an executive director role and overseeing the Bitcoin strategy itself. Essentially bringing that portion of the business, which is synergistically attached to the private credit business, which we'll get into a little bit later, to life. I oversee that and work very closely with the CEO relative to that.
Yeah. The henhouse was too full for our other partners, Saifuddin Namus, who is the author of the Bitcoin Standard, and our chief investment officer, Akshay Karan. The group structure looks quite complex, but is quite simple to understand. We operate the business across 4 different verticals. Up at the top, you can see the various exchanges that we listed on, and those range all the way from Johannesburg Stock Exchange to Namibian, European, and hopefully quite soon, an exchange in London. We operate a treasury company the same way a bank or an insurance company would, and that the job of the treasury team is to secure capital at the lowest possible price, which is then deployed into the various other businesses. We've got the second column is our advisory and solutions business, which provides financial structuring, financial advice, and other wealth management work to the SMEs that we look after. Then the third vertical is our growth funding vehicles. Private credit is by far the most popular and the majority of our revenue earning potential. But indeed, we have venture capital, we've got seed capital, and township economy abilities as well. On the far right column, we've got our 2 private equity deals that we've done to date, and those were also delivered to provide SME funding to SMEs. Our financial performance, we are a small company, particularly from international standards. We do hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet, 5.5. So it's a very small proportion of our balance sheet right now. Depending on the currency you work in, we've delivered profits. My eyesight is failing me here, but our revenue is around almost $1 million in USD and 750 in pound sterling. Profits for the year was 16 million in ZAR, almost $1 million in dollars, and 767 in pounds. The loan book has worked exceptionally well, and we'll get into that quite soon. We've got a cash burn of around 26 million per annum rand, only 1.5 million in dollars and 1.2 million in pounds. We currently operate a debt to equity ratio of 42%. We issue out Bitcoin, we take Bitcoin backed funding with a maximum LTV of around 45%, currently at 42%. And our bad debts is as low as 0.9%. And we'll get into that. The current share price is around 30 US cents and around 23 pence. All right, the structural SME gap. What is driving the demand and what is our total addressable market? Across the world, SME funding is a massive problem. Most SMEs, it doesn't matter the market or the region, struggle to get funding from the traditional capital markets. That problem is more pervasive and more acute in Africa. And in fact, the World Bank has estimated that there is a 247 billion pound sterling financing gap. for SMEs. Banks don't serve SMEs, and they are ill-equipped to deal with the nature and structure of small businesses across the continent. They also aren't structured to take on the additional risk that comes with borrowing to SMEs, because they could quite simply invest in government bonds or debt and earn 12% without taking any risk. At the same time, there's massive demand from low-yield countries, the G20, where money market instruments and bonds return yields of well below 5%, and in some areas like Japan, below 1%. And so we find that there's a demand from yield-starved countries for access to these markets where double-digit yields are quite easily and without substantial more risk delivered to investors. Africa also provides a unique demographic that is perfect for providing capital to. We've got a young mobile-first population, 1.5 billion people, average age 19. Most of these people are unemployed and have chosen entrepreneurship as a way to catapult themselves out of poverty. And so we've got a range of businesses, and a number of unicorns have emerged already from Africa. The major obstacle is not access to opportunity. That is plenty. Africa has got lots of resources, lots of opportunity, and lots of problems to solve. And our youth are certainly doing that. What they lack is access to capital. There are, at the same time, lots of advancements in technology. For example, Africa skipped the whole landline process and went straight from analog to digital mobile communication. And at the same time, we face a number of structural financial challenges: high inflation, volatile currencies, and limited access to hard assets. So the solution set that ABC provides to this vast population is investment opportunities, opportunities to earn yield, most importantly, opportunities to access capital, retirement and investment products, and insurance and related services. For today's purposes, I want to double click and drill down into the private credit opportunity. We've got a 3-year track record, and our loan book analytics as at the 31st of May are exceptional, I don't mind saying. A lot of people gawk at this and find it difficult to believe, but these numbers are audited. We publish them twice a year, and our investors have access to quarterly reporting. It's also very high impact, and we measure impact and take impact very seriously. We've supported to date 59 loans. It's properly diversified across 23 different industries, 45 different companies with family-owned and run companies, and we've created a significant 2,406 jobs. The loan book is exceptional. You can see the credit statistics. Provision for bad debts is around 3.7%. Arrears fluctuates between 3 and 5% of the book. The statistic we're most proud of is our bad debts or write-offs, so money that we can't ever recover, and that is less than 0.1%. It's actually 0.9%. And you can compare that to private credit loss in the US, which is around 9.2%. And you can check that stat in Reuters or Bloomberg or any other financial publication. We track our movements to make sure we're growing, and that's quite clear. If you compare our May numbers or Q2 numbers to our year-end numbers, you'll see growth across every metric. And this opportunity is all right. That expansion includes our surrounding neighbors to start with, Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. But certainly, post that, we'll be expanding into Kenya, Uganda, and some of the other northern and eastern and western African countries. I'm going to hand over to Stafford now to talk to our flywheel and the value creation engine, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. So what Warren just depicted there is our private credit side of the business. And I would say the private credit is probably the engine of the business. That's where we have analysts inside there. This is not a typical private credit business where we've put our private credit service on a website and people simply gain access to a loan via a wizard that they click. We actually engage with SMEs very deeply. We look and identify specific SMEs. And I just want to make something very, very clear. Although Africa has high yields and low capital markets, we tend to interpret that high yield as high risk. Hopefully, our loan book is demonstrating that that is actually a high opportunity versus a high risk. So what we present to investors is the opportunity to gain yield in markets that are very low in capital, very high in yield, and utilizing an asset like Bitcoin to do that. So what we essentially do is we take Bitcoin and we collateralize Bitcoin. So we utilize it as a piece of collateral that we can lend against in very conservative manners and deploy the proceeds from that lending into our private credit engine. So we're not accumulating Bitcoin with the objective of deploying Bitcoin into our SMME base. No, we take Bitcoin, and for the first time ever, we have a piece of collateral that we can actually lend against. And we can lend against that capital or that piece of collateral at a rate sub 5%. And that's earth-shattering for us. We've never had that as Africans, and that's the opportunity that unlocks this enormous opportunity, high yielding, not high risk, high yielding, high opportunity with collateral, sub 5%, where we can deploy the fiat that comes out of that, the US dollars that comes out of that at sub 5%, we can deploy into a private credit engine at 18+%. So that's the arbitrage, and that feeds this flywheel. So what you see over here is two economic pillars. So one is our core operating business on the right-hand side, which goes into the machinations of our private credit engine. And what you see on the right and on the left-hand side is what we do from a Bitcoin treasury perspective. So we accumulate Bitcoin, and what we do is we lend against that Bitcoin, and our board has given us the authority to lend up to 40% against Bitcoin. So the price sensitivity of the asset is not really an issue for us because we lend at such conservative rates. And when we lend at those conservative rates, we extract the fiat out of it. We deploy that fiat into the private credit engine, high yields, 18+%, and the proceeds from that feeds back into the treasury again. And this is the first time that we've seen in the world a business that's actually taking its core engine and empowering it with this pristine capital and lending against it at very low yields and deploying it at high yields in a very conservative, meticulous manner, demonstrating that it can do this at scale over the last 3 years. And that's the opportunity. And that's the flywheel. So what you see in this is the two value creation pillars of the business. So this is another derivative of that slide where we go into Bitcoin backrighted. So we accumulate Bitcoin, we access capital on a global basis very cheaply. We deploy that capital, and from those profits and proceeds, the flywheel kicks in and it deploys back in again. So where we are today as a business, we're raising capital relative to this flywheel. We've demonstrated that we can do it with Bitcoin. And although we only have 5.5 Bitcoin on our balance sheet, I think it's quite important to articulate that. The reason we've been real conservative around this is because we want to make sure we got the right investors when we take this engine and we scale it. We had to make sure that our board was capable of building the business around this. So our board right now is constituted relative to this. Our regulators are aligned to this. And we've demonstrated that we can accumulate responsibly and actually feed that back into the flywheel. So that's a very important point. As far as you can see here, the cost of capital, this is kind of demonstrating how we take Bitcoin, lend against it, and how it compares to our traditional cost of capital. So our traditional cost of capital sits at around 12% when we get money from pension funds and other capital allocators. But Bitcoin allows us to gain access to capital sub 5%. And that's a major differentiator for us. And that essentially tells you, what are the risks associated with that lending when we're doing it at 30 to 40%. Here's the gross margins. So, I mean, you can take a look at this. I'm also have to squint a little bit here, Warren, but on the left-hand side, it says average rate loans is 18%. Current cost of debt is 12.5%. So that's kind of our current traditional business. It's at about 5.5%. But if you take a look at across the continent, what are the lending rates are? If you look at South Africa, if you take a look at Namibia, and we look at Zimbabwe, it's 46%. It's extraordinary. Yeah, in Zimbabwe, you lend at 20% per month. And that's just extraordinary, the cost. So if we can take this flywheel, which we're doing, we've listed in Namibia, we're going up north. And this is an important point. This is not a South African play. This is a Pan-African play. And if you take a look at the yields north of our border, they're significantly higher. In fact, they double the amount of yields that you see in South Africa. So the opportunity is quite significant once you start taking this flywheel Pan-African. In terms of our performance analytics, we publish these out. So again, we're a publicly traded company. We're fully audited. Forvis Mazars is our auditor. And they've got the crypto expertise to actually take a look at what we're doing from a Bitcoin treasury perspective and the traditional business and tie those two together. And these are just some of the numbers that you can see on our publicly published out dashboard relative to our treasury. And we'll continue to update that. So what makes us different? Bitcoin gives us a strategic advantage. Global low cost of funding, our market accessibility. It's not just trading across multiple exchanges in the world, but also trading across exchanges, Pan-African. And I think the key thing, what we're talking about is impact-driven growth. And what we think is incredible is not having a Bitcoin leaderboard, but actually having a board of lives change. So every Bitcoin that we raise, we articulate it as between 5 and 8 African jobs that it impacts. And that's the opportunity for us to impact hundreds of thousands of millions of lives and jobs over the longer term. So Warren, I don't know if you want to jump in here and take us towards the end. Warren, are you there? Or do you want me to continue?
Yeah, I think we might have lost Warren. So why don't you continue, Stafford?
Okay. So no, absolutely. So in terms of why do you invest in us? So I think it's asset exposure. We regulated access to 2 high growth asset classes, both private credit and Bitcoin. We're very excited about those 2 aspects coming together. African growth. Warren articulated average age is 19, population 1.5 billion. Population will be 2 billion by 2030. The continent has young people that are not looking to save their dollars. They're not looking for yield in terms of pension funds. What they're looking for is capital to build, scaled businesses. And I want to emphasize that African growth doesn't necessarily mean risk. We've demonstrated over the last 3 years with our loan book that we can unearth businesses that are highly securitized, and the deal flow is quite significant across Africa. I mean, our loan book is 5 times oversubscribed at any point in time. So attractive risk-adjusted yields and returns associated with that. We've demonstrated 18%. 18% is extremely competitive, especially if you go north of our border. And if we can drop our weighted average cost of capital from 12% down to sub 5%, I mean, it speaks for itself. And then obviously the compounding flywheel. The more and more capital we deploy, the proceeds from that feed into the treasury. The treasury builds up this pristine capital. We keep lending against that conservatively, responsibly. We keep deploying it in, and this creates a beautiful flywheel that is quite unique in the world today. And then our structural advantage. We're a first mover. We have a significant moat. We've been doing this for quite a while now. The regulators watch us very carefully. And it's very difficult to do this. You couldn't, people say, what's your competitive moat here? There's not a lot of companies that can come and replicate the strategy. You really need analysts that understand how these businesses operate, have acumen in terms of deploying capital, identifying risk, and managing the businesses associated with that. The opportunity right now, so if you take a look at our share price, Warren, are you there? I wanted you to chime in here. Maybe you can take these last couple of slides and run with it.
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, cool. All right, so our 12-month high has been 45 pence. Market cap at that rate is about 15.5 million pounds. The 12-month low was 0.7 pence, but the current price is around 27 cents or pence. and we're flirting with the 10 million market cap raise. We are raising a minimum of 250,000 quid. The business doesn't actually really need the capital, but we do want to demonstrate in a responsible way how we're going to take the business forward. What we'll use the money for is to acquire Bitcoin for the treasury and meet minimum capital raise requirements for our Aquis IPO. All right, we're quite visible in the market. If you care to look for us, we've got a number of podcasts. We've done a lot of podcasts with a lot of serial Bitcoiners and other financial experts. And we've got our own YouTube page. We've got a number of social media handles. And our website certainly is the major place where, or the primary destination you should be heading to for more information. Like our latest financials are published there, all shareholder reports, our latest investor deck, and also different methods to contact us. Disclaimer, an important notice to investors. This is not a solicitation for investment. We are, however, trying to educate members who shareholders or potential investors who, if they do need to or are interested in learning more, should visit our website and consult their financial advisor. We'll stop there for questions.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. All right. We do have lots of questions, not too much time, but let's see how many we can get through. A question from our viewer asks, which African markets offer the largest commercial opportunity today?
Let me address that. From our perspective, the markets that we're most interested in right now and is Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. And the reason for that is the amount of idle capital in those markets are quite vast. Botswana, Namibia, and Zimbabwe have really well-regulated pension fund and financial markets, but very little investment opportunity within those regions. They're also very culturally similar from a language perspective to South Africa, and so those we attack in first. But certainly the continent is ripe with opportunity. It just gets increasingly difficult the more north you go, and that difficulty is introduced because customarily it's very different. And East and West Africa are split into French-speaking and English-speaking nations, and so in addition to the local languages or native languages. So it gets increasingly more complex as you go, but the markets and opportunities are available across the continent.
Thank you for that. And how exposed are revenues to Bitcoin price volatility?
Let me take that one, Warren. In terms of exposure, so we have a policy. If you could, we well-published our policy. So when we get Bitcoin, we lend against it very conservatively. So we lend against it at 30% as a default. If we feel bullish, we'll go up to 40%. So in terms of price sensitivity in the market, we give ourselves the ability to, have a yawn of about 70%. So, if the price fluctuates in and around that, we constantly monitor the price. From a governance perspective, our CFO monitors our exposure and our loans relative to it on a daily basis. It gets reported upon. And at any point in time, relative to what we have and what's operating inside the private credit engine, we can deploy capital to top up the collateral within that facility should the need arise. So we monitor it very closely. We feel that at a 30 to 40%, we can draw enough out of it. And, we're not going to see 70, 80% drawdowns overnight in this space. But that's why we say we're less price sensitive, and we feel we've got the necessary guardrails, governance policies, and operations that control each one of these loan facilities.
All right. Let me just add to that, because the question, I think, was more specific to revenue. Revenue is not impacted at all by Bitcoin. Bitcoin allows for us, because of our lower cost of capital, to increase our net profit margins, and the price of Bitcoin has no bearing on that either. What does have a bearing on our profit margins is the rate at which we can lend and the rate at which we can borrow. Neither of those metrics or variables are reliant at all on Bitcoin. In the same way, a bank's profitability is not linked to the assets they hold on balance sheet, but rather how many transaction fees they can charge and the investment deals they can do. Similar for us, how we capitalize our balance sheet doesn't impact our ability to generate revenue. It does impact profitability, though, in a positive way, in that the more we can borrow at those low rates, the wider the margins are, and the more profitable the business will be.
And let's talk about the next 6 to 12 months. What are some key milestones investors should watch out for?
Key milestones. So the first and most immediate is a successful London listing. And then to set up operations on the ground in Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia. And I think if I ask for any more than that, the team will walk out. So those are the three, the milestones and targets for the rest of the year. But more importantly, to demonstrate that the flywheel works, and to scale that flywheel and get it spinning real fast.
So let me speak to that just for a second, Anna. Just in terms of the prioritization on the Bitcoin strategy side, as we raise capital relative to acquiring the asset, from a prioritization perspective, getting that flywheel demonstrably working is key for us. So what we will do every week is we will acquire some of this asset, lend against it, show the deployment of it into the SMEs, and actually demonstrate the impact, showcase these SMEs. And we want to do that week on week on week when the flywheel starts kicking in, to show folks that this thing works, it's highly impactful, and it's life-changing. Big priority for us.
And I'll let you close with this dual question. Talk a little bit about what investors you're hoping to connect with through being on this, this platform today. And what do you want investors to leave with after watching your presentation?
All right, let me start with that. So our understanding that, the emerging markets population, or the guys who attend, are largely retail. And that's what we like. We like the support of the retail public. Of course, institutional capital is sticky, but we want, the various investment communities made up of everyday people who understand these problems and are able to apply their capital towards solving these problems as our investors. And so I want people to leave this thinking about a number of things. Number one is that capital can be profitable and impactful. They're not mutually exclusive. So you can invest in us and create jobs. You can invest in us and change lives. The second point I want people to leave with is that Bitcoin, while it's volatile and not very adopted, can be used now, if used responsibly, to lower costs of capital for businesses. And the way we do it doesn't expose people to the vagaries of the Bitcoin market or the crypto market. What it does do is show that a company like ours is at the forefront of digital and capital structure innovation. So those 2 points for me. And Steph, I'll let you close off with your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think what we provide as a conduit, a passing engine into Africa, the deep, dark Africa. Our continent is filled with incredible human latent potential. We have minerals, we have resources. We now have what we've never had before, and that's artificial intelligence. And for us, AI is a major unlock. So what you can have is a small business enabled with these artificial cognitions that's capable of doing things that were previously unimagined. And what we feel is the Africa Rising, the Africa Opportunity, Pan-African, is to take these young people, provide them capital, give it to them at high yields as far as you as investors concerned. We'll manage that very closely and tightly. And I think we're going to birth the next generation of businesses from our continent with our play. I always say, will the next Twitter X come from Africa? Will the next Facebook come from Africa? Definitely not. I think the next Facebook of agriculture will. The next, Google of financial services will. And what ABC wants to do is provide a pathway for investors to pull capital into this market, demonstrate that this high yield is not high risk, it's high opportunity, and birth some of these incredible African stories. And I think an investor from an impact perspective was able to come along with that journey. And what we provide is a window into the African continent. It's not a South Africa play, it's a Pan-Africa play. We think it's significant, and we think it's one of the most significant opportunities on the planet today. And I think our continent has huge potential, human resources. And if you combine that with the technological shift, I think that's what ABC presents with a flywheel that's unique, differentiating, and we're excited about it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Stafford. Thank you, Warren. We really appreciate you telling us your story and your vision, and we certainly hope to follow along with you. So we'd love to have you back on the conference real soon.
Thanks, Anna.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching. We'll be right back with our next presenter.